There's literally no excuse. Honestly, there is no excuse not to do this today. You could argue that 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, well, there's cost and there's time. That was always the excuse. You're slowing us down with all this customer conversation stuff. Today, there's absolutely no excuse. Collecting the data, finding people to talk to, getting in front of them, showing them something. It's absolutely ridiculous to say that this is not something that you can do. And equally as importantly, that's actually only half the work, right? The other half is then taking all of that insight that you've collected and synthesized and actually changing course based on what you've learned along the way, right? I get it. Founders have strong opinions. They have visions. They have a sense for where they're going. They want to get on that way. Terrific. But we've all seen those diagrams, right? That path is not a straight line. That path is going to be a variety of twists and turns. And those twists and turns should be driven by market insight, customer feedback, customer evidence, what you're hearing from the people that you're trying to serve.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today we're delighted to have Jeff Gothelf on the mic. He's one of the people who taught a generation of teams how to build software. He co-created the Lean UX movement, wrote the book on it, literally, Lean UX, and now is in its third edition, and followed it with the Harvard Business Review press book, Sense and Respond, and most recently, Who Does What by How Much? I love that name. A customer-centric take on OKRs. Thanks for coming on, Jeff.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, we've heard about the books, but I'd love to hear from the man. What's your background? What's your origin story?
I was a failed musician. You tried to be a rock star and gave it a real shot for a couple of years, toured with a couple of bands on the East Coast of the US. Those guys are still my best friends to this day. In fact, we all just got together again recently, about a month ago, and it was so nice. But didn't work out. Ended up the web was becoming a thing at that time, and so
the World Wide Web, or just the web?
Not the World Wide Web, but the interactive internet,
the information superhighway.
Yeah, exactly. So I taught myself HTML and basic, website design, and began to build websites for myself, my band, my friends' bands, and that type of thing. And then, back in 1999, if you could spell HTML, you could get a job. And so I started building websites and doing web design, and that led to interaction design and UX, and then ultimately leadership roles in design and then product management. And then finally in 2012, I went out on my own and started a consulting, it was a services business, building apps and services in a way that seemed to make a lot of sense at the time. That was kind of in contrast to the way that most software was being built at the time. And we built that business. It was called Neo over 4 years. And then when that sold, in 2015, I was out on my own for a long time, and then really collaborating very closely with co-author Josh Seiden, working together independently on the content. And then in the last few years, we have, among other things, solidified that into Sense and Respond Learning these days, which is our product management training company.
Wow. Yeah, so much to unpack there. What a journey. I love the started as a rock star. What instrument were you playing?
I played piano.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Everybody needs a keyboardist in the band, right?
It is. It's one of those things that, like, if you need one, it's hard to find one. Not all the rock bands in the world are looking for one, but if you're looking for one, it's good to be one.
Yeah. It's good. Yeah. That's like the hardest to fill sometimes. Yeah. After the drummer's kind of core too, right? Like,
well, the drummers are hard. Yeah, for sure. And what's interesting is I recently got conscripted into a Grateful Dead cover band, and which not 100% my bag. It's not 0% my bag. It's like 57% my bag, I guess. But I really enjoyed the gig. It's a really cool band with a bunch of guys kind of from a variety of different places. And we did some shows, and the shows did really well. And then all of a sudden, to your point, people are like, I have a band that does Grateful Dead songs over here, and we need a keyboard player.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody wants to be Jerry, but nobody wanted to be Pigpen, because that type of thing. So it's good to be a keyboard player sometimes.
It's amazing. Yeah, still on my bucket list to play in a band. I play guitar, but not very well. So you help name and popularize Lean UX. Maybe you could just define what that means versus just what is UX and what is Lean UX as comparison.
UX is user experience design, right? And it's been a practice for decades, and it's a combination of the visual design, the interaction design, the copywriting, the content strategy, the whole sort of presentation layer of an interactive experience. Lean UX came out of years of really a decade of doing that kind of design work and working with teams doing that kind of design work, and ending up in a place where on a good day, 50% of my work got implemented, which meant that on a good day, 50% of my work got thrown away. And I wasn't going to put in another decade of having half my work being thrown out. And part of the reason for that is because of it was sort of the nature of software development, even online. It's not just sort of, I started America Online, and we made software that went on CDs, but even building websites and web apps and digital products and services, there's still this belief, even to this day, which is mind-boggling to me, that you can predict exactly what the software is going to look like and how it's going to work and what it's going to do and how long it's going to take to build and what people are going to do with it, right? And we were living in that world, whatever that was, 15 years ago. And for me,
waterfall world, as it were,
world,
right?
Exactly right. So this very, very linear approach to developing products, digital products and services. And so we would make all these assumptions about the design up front, right? Because design came early in the waterfall cycle. And then at least half that work, if not more, would get thrown out. And I just wasn't going to.
Was this kind of an artifact? I mean, if you think historically, just because of the way software was manufactured, packaged, distributed, and sold. And so you kind of had to do it like that because you literally had to ship it.
Exactly right. That's
and it was hard to update it over the air. Like we're used to getting an iPhone update every few days now, right? But back then it's like, okay, I had to like package up the CD as it, or the floppy disk and actually send it to you to get Windows 3.0 to 3.1. And so on.
Look, I worked at America Online, and it was exactly like that. We'd work for 6 to 9 months building software, and then we would stop building software, and we would print 15 million CDs, and then put them in the mail, and hope that we built the right thing.
Hopefully that works.
Yeah. And that style of working, it fits leadership teams really well, because leadership teams can just say like, well, just build this and build that. And when we get it done, and then ship it, and we'll be done. Right. And there's no question, because at least up until things got highly interactive, it was difficult to determine whether or not we were actually building something valuable. Right. And now that it's a lot, much easier to figure out if we're building something of value much sooner in the process, we're seeing a lot more of that sensing and responding, that build, measure, learn type of learning loop in products. But still to this day, I work with tons of companies where there's a lot of leadership direction, and moving away from that leadership direction is occasionally a career limiting move in these organizations. And so Lean UX was a reaction to that, right? Lean UX was an attempt to say, look, I am not going to deploy everything that I have in the design arsenal on every single thing that we're doing, right? What I'm going to do is use the tools just at the right level, just enough to move the conversation forward one step, to get feedback on that step, and then determine if I should still move forward, or if I should change direction, or if I should kill the idea and try something else. So that was the approach in that book. And it was highly based on the lean startup movement, which was gaining traction right around the same time. So, in fact, Lean UX is a series of books that Eric Ries put his name on, right? The Lean series.
He's been on the pod actually a couple of times.
Exactly, and so heavily influenced by that, but really applied directly to the design practice, and as a reaction to making design work in agile software engineering, which was sort of like the next wave of software engineering, supposed to counteract a lot of the negative aspects of waterfall software development, and so that. And design was never really considered as part of Lean Startup. It was never really considered as part of Agile. And so this was our attempt to really have that conversation using that foundation that a lot of the world was shifting over to.
Do you recall kind of when you could sense that something, to use a pun on your book here, but you could sense something was wrong with the process? Do you recall like a meeting or a aha moment where you're sitting there, it's like, there's got to be a better way. This sucks,
Yeah, I remember this. I used to work for this EVP at America Online. He was a difficult person to work with. Just leave it at that. And I was a relatively young designer. He micromanaged a 2,500 person organization. Like, to give you a sense of the, he knew everything. He knew every pixel, every detail, every workflow, every single thing. And I remember one time I was working on some workflow, and I printed out my design work. We printed it out, right? Because that's how software is made, on paper. And I remember walking into his office. He had this big office, and I walked in at the front door, and he was on the other side of the room in his chair, and I'm walking over shaking with my piece of paper in hand, and he goes, from a distance, like I didn't even get a chance to present, he says to me, he goes, "There's nothing remotely close to anything I want to see on that sheet of paper." And I was like, I just spent a week of my life on this, and I was like, I cannot, this is not going to be my career if this is the way that we're moving forward. And that was the beginning of the tipping point for me.
Yeah.
Was this like executive direction above all without any customer input? It just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah. But you couldn't change it because of the top-down leadership in the way software was manufactured and delivered at the time. When was it possible? I think you can make a case that the whole lean movement was sort of enabled by first the internet, which took 5 or 10 years to kind of change how software was like built and delivered, but also cloud. Right now, all of a sudden, you could sort of like for free, a couple guys with a laptop, a couple kids with a laptop could iterate. Right? Do you recall sort of how that technological shift felt at the time?
I mean, it was incredible, right? I mean, the interesting thing is that we at America Online, I mean, this was 1,000 years ago, right? We did use extensive user research, but it was all based on a series of assumptions, and then we just had to build and ship, and then all of a sudden, right, you could put up a website in no time. You could show somebody a landing page in a day or 2 days or however long it took to get it going. You could prototype. I mean, Dreamweaver, wow, that was a tool right back then where you had a WYSIWYG editor for websites. It was revolutionary at the time, and ultimately super empowering because it allowed us to get from idea to feedback in a much shorter learning loop all of a sudden. So the cost of learning came down significantly. So, before it was like, well, we're going to go spend 2 days in this research facility behind the one-way mirrors and, eat a bunch of candy and watch 20 people tell us exactly the same thing and drop 20 grand on that. That was unscalable and unsustainable. And now all of a sudden, to your point, right, myself and one other person could put something together, show it to 5 customers, get some feedback, iterate on it, and move that forward again in a much more condensed time frame. And that was revolutionary.
Yeah. And how does, as someone who lived through that moment, how does this moment feel different or the same with AI? How is that kind of changing what lean UX is and how how UX gets done? Right? You have things like cloud design and, like that's only going to get better. Like how does it kind of feel now on the ground as you sort of go out and work with people on this?
Number one, it's incredibly powerful and incredibly exciting. And I think to some extent, it's also incredibly frightening because all of a sudden you don't need the designer or a person with a specific job title to bring your ideas to life.
Yeah. And that's seeming to be kind of the case everywhere. I hear it all the time. The designer's going away, the PM's going away, the engineer's going away. Like all you have left is like, I don't know, somebody with an idea who can talk to AI.
I don't think so. I don't think those roles are going away. I mean, I know we've got these examples of the one person startup these days or the 2-person startup who does everything. I still think that's a pretty rare case. I think the reality is that if everybody keeps prompting these things into existence, we're heading towards sort of a kind of a trough of mediocrity where everything looks and functions and sounds exactly the same. And we got a taste of this back in the Twitter days with Twitter Bootstrap. Twitter Bootstrap, I don't know if you recall, was a design system that Twitter put out, and it was
their design library.
Yeah, exactly. It was a wonderful design system, right? And it came with everything you needed. It came with all the visual assets, all the code, everything you needed, and a beautiful website to kind of pick and choose the pieces that you need, put your website together, and ship it. And what happened? Every website in the world looked like Twitter Bootstrap.
Right.
There was no creativity, there was no innovation, there was no originality. And so we're going to end up in the same place, right? Like I can't tell you how many times I read something or see something or get sent something. I'm like, this is Claude, 100% Claude every time. It's not you. It's
I can hear Claude's voice in this. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so what's going to happen now is we are going to start to crave authenticity and humanity and originality and innovation in the work. And that is where the humans are going to play. So cool. Let's all bring our ideas to the next meeting. Terrific. I prompted this, you prompted that, she prompted that thing. Great. Now let's get all the feedback and then let somebody with actual experience and expertise put together the next version of this that not only is an improvement on what came into that meeting, but solves a real customer problem in a meaningful way and provides a unique opinion on the product or the service so that you stand out in the marketplace.
Yeah. I love this I want to tug on this idea that you said, which is really interesting. And maybe this is a recurring pattern in the history of, technology, society, capitalism, where we sort of innovate and we come up with a mass produced something like a Model T, right? Like an automobile, right? And it's like everybody now can have an automobile, and it's great. Everybody's happy. But then after the mass production of something comes the customization of something, right? And sort of the proliferation of all of our, endless like little iterations of desire, right? And maybe that's happening now with sort of software, right? We're getting the the Model T, right, which is like Claude or ChatGPT that can produce almost anything, but it's really generic, right? It is like the Twitter, design library that you just described of software. And now we'll get like a proliferation of even more design and taste and human ingenuity. I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think ultimately the companies that are going to stand out are going to have a strong opinion about how they provide value in whatever space they're in. And that strong opinion will ultimately manifest as innovation, as creativity, as humanity, as uniqueness, because we crave that, right? And that ideally starts to drive the relationships, the trust, and the loyalty that we're looking to get from our customers. Like, why do I bank here and not there, right? You could argue the features are relatively identical. I'll give you an example. Here's a named example, right? I've had a Bank of America account for 30 years, right? Their online software is still garbage for 30 years, but I've got some momentum there. Now, by comparison, the layer, like the actual usage layer, I barely use their website. It's just sort of like the foundational accounts below it. But the UI layer for me for banking is Wise, the company that used to be TransferWise. Why? Because I've got a daughter university in London and I need pounds, and I've got stuff to do in euros, and I've got things to do in dollars. And Wise creates a UI layer that's digitally native, that's super easy to use, that doesn't mess around with all the kind of like the legacy intricacies that Bank of America and the Wells Fargos of the world have to deal with, right? And so I'm so loyal to that as the day-to-day tool because they have a strong opinion about what banking and transacting and living in a multi-currency world should look like, right? As opposed to Bank of America that's coming from 50 years or whatever of historical inertia that doesn't allow them to move that forward. And it's the people who have that opinion and then manifest it that are going to win over this kind of like ultimately, look, I have the 30 years of history with Bank of America, but it doesn't really matter to me that it's Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Citibank or JP Morgan or Chase or whatever underneath it, right? Because I use Wise every day. That's what matters to me.
It's funny you mentioned that. It's what you're describing as the phenomenon of like UX as the differentiator, right? And we kind of saw that, I think, in the 2010s, especially with Airbnb, right? Because there were other Airbnbs like VRBO and others before that did vacation rentals.
Yeah,
they just didn't do it as good, like in a very friendly way that Airbnb was able to, differentiate by design. That'd be a good book title, actually. Designers. Differentiate by design.
Right. Those guys were designers. That was their background, right?
Yeah, from the Rhode Island, one of the best design schools in the world, right? And the banking example is prescient. I bank, for Team Ignite Ventures, our early stage venture firm. We bank with Mercury, which is just a UI wrapper around another financial firm. Mm-hmm. But it just makes everything so easy. And it's just delightful to bank with them. I can upload, when I invest in a company, I can upload a safe and the wire instructions and just magically just takes care of everything. And just with a few clicks versus I was with another bank. I won't name them because I don't want to throw them under the bus, but it was terrible. Just to send a wire was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just lots of steps.
But you just said it. It's delightful to bank, right? Delightful to bank is an opinion. Mm-hmm. Right? It's an opinion. Like if you're saying, look, our strong opinion about how we will differentiate in the market, our strategy, right, is we're going to be delightful to bank with. Okay. Then everything follows from that. And you can't mire yourself in the sameness of the output of these LLMs, right? It's just going to be insufficient to do that, right? There's a sea of Android phones out there, and the difference between them, I couldn't tell you, right? But there's only one iPhone, right? Because they took a very opinionated approach to building a mobile experience in that particular case, right? That's where this is headed ultimately. I don't think the specialties are going away. I think specialties are evolving, and I think that how we get to these decisions is evolving, but I think we need them if we want to stand out in the market.
Yeah. So, this show has a lot of founders who listen in, we've backed a lot of founders. So how does all this we're talking about, OKRs and design and UX, like how should founders think about all this stuff? And like, how is that changing? How is the advice changing now as we record this in 2026 versus what you might have said to a founder, back in 2006 or 2016? What is changing now on the ground where if you're talking to any founders?
Look, I think foundationally, not much, not a whole lot. Like, I think that understanding your customer, solving a real problem for a real customer in a meaningful way to them, to be clear, not for you, but for them, and is still the recipe for success, for building a successful business, making evidence-based decision-making. I don't think those things change. They certainly were true in 2006, in 16, and certainly today in 2026. The capabilities that we have today to understand our customers, to understand their problems, their behaviors, to synthesize that data, and to come up with more creative, more innovative, and more plausible hypotheses for how what our strong opinions should be and how to successfully meet their needs in a way that nobody else is doing is exponentially more powerful today, right? There's literally no excuse, honestly. There is no excuse not to do this today. You could argue that 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, there was, well, there's cost and there's time. That was always the excuse. You're slowing us down with all this customer conversation stuff. Today, there's absolutely no excuse. Collecting the data, finding people to talk to, getting in front of them, showing them something. It's absolutely ridiculous to say that this is not something that you can do. And equally as importantly, that's actually only half the work, right? The other half is then taking all of that insight that you've collected and synthesized and actually changing course based on what you've learned along the way, right? I get it. Founders have strong opinions. They have visions. They have a sense for where they're going. They want to get on that way. Terrific. But we've all seen those diagrams, right? That path is not a straight line. That path is going to be a variety of twists and turns. And those twists and turns should be driven by market insight, customer feedback, customer evidence, what you're hearing from the people that you're trying to serve.
Yeah. And this is the perennial problem, right? When you're going 0 to 1 is, problem, what you're describing is the process of like, okay, problem identification. Do people actually have this problem?
Yeah.
Right.
At scale.
And at scale. And that's like market validation. Are there lots of people that have this problem? And then like, will they pay for it? And then solution validation. Hey, here is this thing. Would you pay for it? How do you kind of advise, companies to go through these kind of phases? It's still kind of the same kind of lean UX phases as it was, 10 or 20 years ago, it sounds like.
It is. It is, right? The take, like the process of building that knowledge, it can't be faked, right? You can, like I said, you can get there faster. And there's a lot. So for example, right, there's a lot of talk right now about, well, I'll just synthesize some users in ChatGPT and I'll talk to them.
Yeah, there's a couple startups actually that do that. Artificial Societies, I think, came out of YC. There's a few others like that where they simulate your users, right? They
just don't buy it. I don't buy it. Like as a way to practice your interviewing skills, as a way to test your scripts, right? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Work with synthetic users, but like truly, like sitting with someone,
some ad copy, maybe. Yeah,
exactly. But sitting with someone and watching them try to get through a workflow, watching them, having them show you how they currently do something, and then asking them why they do that certain thing, and then looking for those patterns across people. It's incredible. I have a story years ago. I used to work at a company in New York City called The Ladders. The Ladders was a job board for people who made $100,000 or more. Right, that was the deal. And, we talk to customers every week. That was a big part of the way that I worked. And I kind of demanded that from my team. And we would talk to these executives on a regular basis, and they would talk about texting was just becoming a thing. Texting wasn't huge yet, right? And they're like, we use SMS for communicating with recruiters. And I said, why do you use SMS, right? And they said, well, I don't believe my boss can read that. Can see that. Like an email, I think my boss can read my email, but text, I can't. They can't see that.
More secretive.
Yeah. there's no way you're going to get that out of a synthetic user, right? That's a pattern that comes out of actually having those conversations. And there's so much nuance too, right? Like there's
that's
body
the implicit
language.
reason, like the like, oh, it's easier. That would be what people like some synthetic human would probably say. Oh, it's easier to just text.
Yeah.
But really the implicit like core reason is like, if you ask the 5 whys and you get to the root cause, right?
Yeah.
Like, no, actually I'm hiding this for my boss.
Yeah. The synthetic user doesn't fear for their job.
Right.
And so, yeah, I just
interesting.
don't buy it. But so that's the key is, again, I don't think you can shortcut that part of it. I think you have to, and look, it's not that big of a deal. Like I'm not saying go sit in a room for 2 days and talk to 20 customers that are, after the fourth one, they all say the same thing. Just talk to 3 every week. Make that part of your routine.
We have a portfolio company, Conveo. I don't know if you've run across these guys, but they basically do the qualitative interviews, AI to human. So that's interesting. So the AI will go interview all the humans, and it's growing super fast. And so, and then you could go back and watch the videos and stuff, but maybe that's only a half solution in your mind, right?
Yeah. No, again, like there's so much, there's so much
the nuance.
The human nuance, body language, expression, tone of voice, hesitation, like reluctance to share something. Like there's no way a human will pick that up, and it's so valuable. Or a human will pick up that pattern. Every time I talk to somebody and I bring up the job search aspect of it, there's this reluctance to even go there. We've got to figure out what that is, because that's core to our value proposition. Whatever that is, I don't believe that a non-human entity can decipher that.
At least not yet, right? Maybe in 10 years when we get 10x better AI every year and it's super intelligent and it can be more human than we can, right? It's overfitted to humanity, maybe.
Maybe.
How do you know when you have, if you're a founder, how do you know when you have a good problem to work on?
I think there's the answer here is the behavior change that you see in the folks that you're talking to, particularly when you're not only asking them about how they're currently solving a particular problem and where the challenges are, so you see the patterns in that, but then ultimately, as you're putting potential solutions in front of them, you can see them light up, you can see their behavior change, you can see how they act with your prototypes, how they act with the material that you've decided to share with them. I think, to me, that's the key, right? And those behavior patterns, right, we call those outcomes. Right. So outcomes, again, sort of being the push here, right? Measurable changes in human behavior that drive business results. And we know these things, right? We've had pirate metrics for a long time, talks about
Dave McClure's pirate metrics. That's great reference. I love those. Yeah.
Yeah. It's throwback, but look, again, it's one of those things that still makes sense, because like that, it was awareness, acquisition, revenue, referral,
activation, retention, revenue, or something like that.
That's it. It's exactly. Retention, revenue, and referral, right? But those are measures of human behavior, right? And if you're finding that people are looking for your thing and they're landing on your page and they're asking for more info, or they're engaging with whatever it is you want them to engage with, that's signal that you're solving something real, right? To me, that's the thing that matters. The thing that's always mattered is the change in the behavior of the people that we want to serve, to indicate that we're doing something valuable for them.
How do you guard against cognitive biases in the measurement, especially when you're doing it more one-on-one with real humans? There could be this tendency, I think, to, I don't know, lead the witness.
Yeah, look, I mean, to me, this is, and again, coming back to this, like, well, which disciplines will survive the AI revolution and which will go away? We have people who are good at this. They're called researchers, right? And the nice thing about having experts who know how to do this is they can teach the rest of us how to do this. And they can help train the bots, I guess, as well, about how to do this. But ultimately, there's lots of tips and tricks and techniques that come from practicing having conversations with people, so that you don't lead the witness. And so that you don't, like tons of stuff, like, you don't show excitement, you don't agree, you don't indicate that you like an answer versus dislike an answer. You ask open-ended questions. When someone says, "Oh, I wish it did this," you say things like, "Oh, well, if you had that," you don't say like, "Wow, me too. I've been wishing for that forever," right? You say, "If you had that, what would it let you do?" Right? And again, what does that come back to? behavior change. What's somebody actually trying to do? Like, again, it's kind of like there's lots of examples you can use, right? But somebody says, oh, I wish it had calendar integration. And you're like, okay, if it had calendar integration, what would it let you do? Well, I wouldn't ever miss any more meetings with my boss, and I would know exactly when to leave to get home on time to see my kid's soccer game. Okay, so the real need is not to miss meetings with the boss and to make it home for your kid's soccer game. Okay, great. Calendar integration is a solution to that. There's an infinite number of ways to solve for that, right? And that's, again, coming back to creativity and innovation, that's where the human aspect really shines through.
Yeah, I love that. That's really interesting. So I guess in the end, it all comes down to taste, right? And sort of, designers inherit the earth a little bit here, right? Because in a world of AI slop and AI can generate everything, it really just comes down to, do I really understand humans and their needs and their pain points and how we're crafting this solution in a way? Do you think AI ever kind of gets there where it can do that better than we can?
Look, at the moment, I think there's a lot of generalizable patterns that it can put forward that are good enough. But again, I just kind of coming back to, I think we end up in a sea of mediocrity, right? It's kind of a race. It's a race to mediocrity. I also don't want to trivialize good product management, good product managers, good designers, as to simply, complimenting them and saying, "Oh, you have good taste," right? Because that gets built, that gets developed, that gets trained, that comes from doing the work. It comes from trying something and understanding that it didn't work this time around.
And that's what people misunderstand about Steve Jobs. They imagine him as the armchair genius, but he actually was out there talking to customers all the time. And doing focus groups, and he was just talking to people, and he was testing the ideas with people, and he didn't just sit there and just come up with that stuff from his office.
Exactly.
He actually got out of his office and talked to people.
Yeah, amazing. Got out of the building.
Got out of the building, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whose phrase is that? Is that Steve Blank?
Steve Blank, yeah.
Yeah, Steve Blank. Shout out to Steve. I love his books too. So what are you telling your kids to work on now? Like, as I have 3 kids, and, should I tell them to just be designers? What is the career, what should people work on now?
It's a great question. So look, I have 2 daughters. One is 23. She has a job, and to my great delight, and I swear I had nothing to do with it, she's a UX designer. She voluntarily chose that career path on her own, I swear. And it's fascinating to watch her work, because foundationally, she's doing exactly the same work I was doing when I started my career. But the tools that she's using, the speed at which she's working, and the issues that she has to deal with are actually very, very different, right? Obviously, she works in Claude Code. She works in Claude Design. She works in Lovable, primarily in those tools to build, to prototype, to build, and then to actually create code for some of these things. And so the speed with which she can work is incredible. The output that she puts together from day one looks good, which isn't necessarily the best approach. But the thing that makes it really, really difficult is that the expectation that it sets for her stakeholders, right? Stakeholders are like, well, when I was doing the work, they were like, okay, here's feedback on your wireframes or your prototype or whatever. When can you have revisions done? I'd be like, well, it might take me about a week or so, maybe a couple of weeks. We'll see you guys then. For her, they know how to prompt. All her stakeholders prompt all day long. Right? They're like, okay, so we'll see you tomorrow with iterations. And she's like, look, I can certainly prompt your requests into the app, but I actually have to think it through to make sure that what you're asking for, makes sense, and what comes back out of these non-deterministic systems actually looks like a thing that we want to put in front of customers, right? And so that, to me, that's the fascinating. She's still solving the exact same problems that I was solving in my career, but the tension and the pressure that she's under to deliver iterations and improvements are compressing the time that she needs to actually do the thinking part.
Right. Yeah. A week or two has compressed to a day or two. If your counterparties will allow that, right? The people you're working with.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah. It's crazy. And so I'm thrilled that she went down this path, and it's fascinating to watch her work. I think design is crucial. I think product management is going to continue to be crucial. Again, these are jobs that have jobs that require opinions. I keep coming back to this because I think, again, I'm sure you've seen this, right? But people are just prompting things into existence, and whatever comes out, they're there and they're handing it off. Hey, I did my job. Here it is, right? And they aren't found in the work at all. right?
Yeah.
And so to me, I think it's and I don't mean to discount software engineers from this as well. Yes, the job will change, right? But having an opinion about how to build something, what to build, what it should look like, and how it should behave is the key to standing out in a world where people are just prompting things and then shipping it and assuming that it's good enough and hoping that it'll.
Yeah. I love that. So of all the books you've written, which one aged the worst and why?
Which one aged the worst? I think the one that aged the worst, I wrote a very short book. It was the fourth book, Lean versus Agile versus Design Thinking. It was really a long essay, just a couple of chapters on reconciling those various processes in a manner, because I was working with organizations that were sort of hiring training for lean and lean startup, hiring training for design thinking, hiring training for agile, and then trying to get all those people to play nice together when they'd been trained with different vocabularies and different goals and different targets. And so that book was designed to help reconcile that conversation. I don't know how prevalent that conversation is today anymore. I feel like lean startup has become sort of part of the general vocabulary rather than so much a process to be followed. Agile is losing some momentum these days as a named brand name process. I think the foundation of the way of working still stands. I haven't heard anybody say design thinking in years, even though it's a valuable process. You don't really hear it nearly as much as you did, 10, 15 years ago as well. So of those four, I think it's that one, simply because it leaned heavily into named processes, or brand name sort of frameworks that are people have either moved on from or are moving on from.
Yeah. It's funny, back to the, question, how do you advise the youth, because I have 3 kids, a couple teenagers. And I think the answer I'm honing in on is just, study what's interesting, study humanity, come up with opinions.
Yeah.
Have go for the general liberal arts education, unless something really, really speaks to you and you really want to study, X, Y, and Z. Just a general humanities, human-centered education.
I think so. And I think they're headed that way. Look, my younger daughter is 19. She's in school and she gives me endless crap every single time I open up an AI tool. Endless. And all her friends are the same. They're rebelling.
They're kind of anti-AI.
Yes. They're rebelling against this. Her older sister too. They roll their eyes so hard every time. Let me just drop it into Claude and see what it says. So hard. They crave real world, almost retro authenticity. To your point of humanity, I think you're right. I think the advice is focus on the humanity side of things, because I think there's going to be such an appetite for it moving forward I think there's going to be a ton of value.
Right. Yeah, go to the live show, watch the musicians, put the record on the record player, hear the warm analog sound, right?
Exactly.
Crave that cup of coffee that you handcrafted and did a pour over in your kitchen, right?
Yeah, embrace the flaws, right? I think that's part of it as well, right? Everything that comes out of at the moment out of all these LLMs is so it looks flawless and it compliments you. Right. Great job.
You're so
Brian.
smart, Jeff.
God, that was such a great idea.
Wow, I didn't even think about it that way, Jeff.
And here's a polished output of whatever it is that you asked for. And I think that people miss the flaws, the rawness of the human side of things. I really think it's an issue.
I borrowed Mark Andreessen's prompt. I don't know if you saw this online. He has a prompt for his AI, and it's a really long one. And the gist of it is accuracy is your most important trait. You're a world expert. You are not to agree with me. You're to point out my flaws and my, when I'm wrong. And there's this long thing about how to get your AI to tell you the harsh truth. And so now that when I talk to my AI, it's really harsh to me. It's basically you're an idiot. What are you doing?
Right.
This is the stupidest thing I've heard.
Not to flip the interview or interviewee chair, but I'm curious if that makes you actually use the AI more or less because I
think it makes me use it more, right? Because it becomes this imperfect, harsh mirror to my thinking, where you're talking to this critic, and we're using it to evaluate startups and evaluate pitch decks and should we invest in this company? Here's the data room. Here's the pitch deck. Here's our transcript of the call. Here's the resumes. And it's just I can't believe you'd even consider investing in this company, basically, is what it's telling me.
I love that.
Wow, okay. Tell me more, because I was really excited to invest in this company, or vice versa, right? I'll be like, ooh, this is definitely a hard pass. And it's like, no, actually, this is a strong yes. And here you're wrong. And here's why. So,
wow. Okay.
So you can actually prompt it in a way to, because it is a little sycophantic, right?
More than a little. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, especially like the old ChatGPT, I think 4.0 was like really, people, remember they protested when they took it away.
Yeah.
They lost their sycophantic friend, right?
Right.
This thing that just like coddled to them.
Look, feels good when someone agrees with you all the time.
Yeah. So everybody look up the Mark Andreessen prompt online and put that in the comments, I guess. So that's a good one. Well, let's wrap up with some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So a popular idea in product management that you think is quietly wrong.
There was an idea for a long time that product managers were the CEO of the product.
Ooh.
And
this is the Ben Horowitz.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. See, the CEOs of nothing.
They're the CEOs gathering everybody's opinion.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. They can't hire, they can't fire, they have no budget. Like the CEOs of nothing.
Yeah. That's funny. They're more like the advisor to the product in a way. Yeah.
Well, they got
the backlog keeper of ideas.
Yeah, it's true.
It's kind of true. Yeah. You can tell I'm a little saucy. I was a PM for a long time. A belief that you hold now that someone you generally respect disagrees with.
Oh, that's such a good one. Gosh.
I have here in my notes, Josh Seiden.
Josh Seiden is my business partner and co-author for like the last 15 years. I mean, he's someone that I greatly respect. And we do disagree occasionally. I think the disagreement is that you can quantify. He believes that you can quantify qualitative benefits to customers, and it's something that I believe that you can quantify behavior driven by those by sort of the lack of those benefits or the presence of those benefits, but he believes you can actually quantify the benefits themselves, the qualitative benefits, and I still to this
right
day.
Yeah, because the benefits are basically like a bucket. It's like a problem. It's the opposite of a problem. It's kind of like it's a benefit versus the underlying need, the pain or the pleasure.
Yeah, it's a thought, it's a feeling. Yeah, it's that type of thing.
Yeah. How painful is this if we take it away from you? Or like, how pleasurable is it to have this? Versus like, I can, my phone unlocks with my face, that's a benefit, right?
Yep, exactly.
But why is that? Like, why is that beneficial?
Why is that good? Yeah.
One thing you were right about before it was obvious, and one thing you were confidently embarrassing wrong.
I've been pushing for years, and I think still to this day, that to get out of the deliverables business. In fact, like kind of my breakout article back in 2011, I think it was called Getting Out of the Deliverables Business. And I think we're in really perilous times to get back into the deliverables business now, because producing stuff is so easy with AI, right? And so we like really just like focusing on the production of stuff is not the production of value necessarily, right? And so I feel like I've been right about that for a long time. As far as things that I was wrong about, there was a thing, like one thing that I, particularly when we were formulating a lot of the lean UX ideas and thinking about lean startup ideas, we were trying to get teams to change the way that they worked. And one of the things that teams really wanted, for example, we talked a lot about in this conversation about speaking with customers, right? And there were a lot of organizations that were like, okay, well, then we'll just measure the number of conversations we have with customers. And I was adamant that was a vanity metric, to use one of Eric Ries's terms, right? Because you could talk to 1,000 customers or 10,000 customers and learn nothing. If you're talking to the wrong people, you're asking the wrong questions, you're not getting the data. And I was totally wrong about that. I've completely changed my mind about that. I do believe that organizations that currently do not do any kind of customer conversations and start to go through the motions of talking to customers, and they're counting that, like, let's say, I just want you to talk to 50 customers this month, right? Whatever it is, inevitably, you're going to get better and more comfortable at that task. So even just going through the motion and counting the motions is a great place to start. So I've completely changed my mind.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the old phrase, 95% of success is just showing up.
Right.
And doing the work, Just show up and do the work. If you just show up and do the work, I mean, I tell my kids that, I have one kid sort of struggling in school. I'm like, are you showing up and doing the work? It's like, no. I'm like, okay, that's the problem. Like, if you just showed up and do the work, you'll probably get A's.
Yeah. And look, and the repetition simply makes you better, right? It's kind of like, I used to use this in talks all the time. The Karate Kid, right? The Karate Kid goes to Mr. Miyagi and he's like, hey, I want to learn karate. And Mr. Miyagi's like, terrific, paint the fence. He's like, but I want to learn karate. He's like, right on, dude. He goes, wash
the car. Yeah, wax my car.
Right. And he's like, what? Like, I don't understand. He's like, just do what I'm telling you. And then like, but he doesn't know it. But through the process of painting the fence and wax on, wax off, right? He's learning karate. It's the same thing, right? Showing up and going through the motions is actually a good thing initially. Eventually, you'll have to move forward and actually get value or deliver value out of those motions. But at the very first, show up and do the work.
Really good advice. A mistake you keep making despite knowing better.
This is, it's embarrassing to admit this publicly and on a recording, but there is for the better part of the last 15 years, right? 15, 16 years, I have been a staunch advocate for assumptions, hypotheses, experiments, evidence-based decision-making, and then pivoting when the evidence contradicts your hypothesis, right? Strong opinions, loosely held, right? That I've been borrowing that phrase and using it forever. And man, I have such a hard time killing my ideas. I love my ideas so much, like really, like to this day, Josh, I talk to Josh, my business partner, every day, and he's like, dude, he's like we need to pivot. We don't have product market fit for this thing. This isn't working. I was like, come on. I was like, 3 more months. We can make it happen. We can make it work. So to this day, like I still
50 more interviews. Just get out of the building, Josh.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I still struggle. Like
we're just interviewing the wrong people.
Right. Exactly. These people don't know what they're talking about. Yeah.
We obviously have the right solution for the wrong person. We just got to go find the right people, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
What's a question you wish more podcast hosts like me asked you on a podcast?
What was the most unlikely job you've ever had that has had a kind of a profound influence on how you work today? That's a question no one's ever asked me.
I love it. And now, please, we want to know the answer. Yeah.
I worked in the circus. I spent my first job out of college. I joined the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus, and I traveled the East Coast with a 3-ring tented circus. I'm not joking. For 6 months, doing circus shows twice a day, 3 times on Saturday so I saw the circus 400 times in a row.
Wow.
That summer, it was a very humbling experience. It was a very difficult experience. I learned a ton about a world that exists that very few people have any insight into. This sub community of 200 people who live and work and celebrate and argue with each other. They mete out justice. Like it's this really crazy world of the circus. I did sound and lighting, by the way. That was my job. I was the sound and lighting technician for 6 months, and I spent 6 months on the road. And it just taught me so much about not making assumptions about people, by truly getting to know the people around you, to be super scrappy. I had this super crappy PA system that was grossly inadequate for the size of the tent that we had to fill with sound. The environment that we were working in was really bad for the equipment. We had elephants and horses, and there was dust,
and
moisture
bouncing
around from place to place, and moisture and rain and humidity. And so the microphones were breaking and the cables were breaking. And it was a lot about like, okay, like I got to hit this lighting cue and solder this microphone back together so that the trumpet solo can be heard in the night. Like it was a lot of stuff like that. I was 22, and it was the most responsibility I ever had because, this community is relying on everybody to pull this off in front of 4,000 people twice a day. And it was a fascinating 6 months, to say the least.
That is a question that's going in the stable. When do you think I should ask that? You think it's right? It's good right here in the rapid fire section, or you think I should ask that at the beginning, after the background question? What is the most unlikely experience that you've had that kind of impacted you? Yeah,
I like it at the end because at this point I've kind of shared a lot of my background and my story, and now you kind of get a little bit of the justification for it.
Yeah, little metacognition here of podcast making, but yeah, I really appreciate the conversation, Jeff. Really enjoyed it. Where can folks find you online?
JeffGothelf.com, senseandrespond.co, and of course LinkedIn. Always the easy places to find me.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure, Brian. Thanks so much for having me.